Hello, my little debate fanatics, and welcome back to another debate dissection. It's me, it's Mark Reed, and we are going to be going through part two of the Dershowitz versus Greenwald debate, which was pretty contentious last time. I must say, for my money, I was not impressed with Dershowitz at all. He seemed like his entire strategy was based upon sort of what's known as a slippery slope. Basically, if this happens, then it happens. Then we might have to do this thing, and it's sort of like, well, you're that's a lot of ifs to be taking violent action against a whole nation for. So I was very unimpressed. Greenwald, I think, had a much stronger position, and he was an excellent debater. Actually, I really did enjoy what he had to say and what he was doing. Yeah, Dershowitz was very disappointing, and I think that Dershowitz sort of really was playing on fears a lot, and I think that Greenwald did a fantastic job by pointing out we've heard all of this before. This is uncannily similar to the sort of Iraq sort of rhetoric pre-invasion, and he's got a point. That's not to say that sort of where Iran is concerned that we sort of have no problems and it's all just wonderful. It certainly isn't. It's just you're talking about launching an invasion of another sovereign country, and I think that Dershowitz is sort of his links are too tenuous for me to take seriously. But we ended just before we get into sort of the questioning each other kind of thing. And so I'll push on. Hello, Dave, and hello, Starsong and Jess. So good to see you. Just awesome to see you. I'm so tired. I'm so sorry. I had so little sleep last night. I don't know why. I just could not sleep. And so I'm going. So if I rant on saying anything of extreme madness, do let me know. But I think I should be okay. I think I should be okay. Yeah, I'll keep with this one. But yeah, I mean, it's a debate that, and thank you very much to Barnaby Wild coming in with $3 US. Really appreciate it, mate, for a super sticker. And I believe it is a dancing lemon baby. Sure, of course. Okay. For some reason, it reminds me of the lemon, was it Lemon Grab off Adventure Time? I don't know why. Yeah. Hello, Robin. Good to see you. Thank you, Barnaby. Really appreciate it. Yeah. So for my money, I just think Dershowitz is saying, like, I think it's that we've heard this before, and I think that Glenrod is absolutely right. But let's get into it and find out what the question time is like. Hopefully, it'll be a bit more spicy. Now I have had feedback on playback. I'm going to increase it a bit, but not as much as I did last time. So hopefully, I can find a good compromise with the speed between people that want it to, want to go through it at a rapid pace, and those that do not, or English might not be their first language.
Do you want to ask? Say it again. Do you want to ask Glenn a question?
Oh, I want to ask him a lot of questions.
Is that okay? Then maybe you want to leave the audience to ask it, or what do you want to do? You want to wave that, or do you want to do it now? Go ahead.
My first question: was the world and was the Middle East a better place or a worse place under the Shah, with all the horrors and all the terrible things that the Pahlavi family and the Shah has done? Was the world safer, a better place under the Shah or under the Ayatollahs?
There's a good question. Was the world a better place under the Shahs or the Ayatollahs? Was Iran a better place under the Shah or the Ayatollah? That's the question. What was the best for the Iranian people is the question, because there's no doubt that the Shah was not the best for the Iranian people. Are the Ayatollahs the best for the Iranian people? No. Was the democracy before the Shah the best for the Iranian people? Yeah, probably. You know what? I think that for the Iranian people, the Shah was probably the worst. It is a good question, though. It's hard to sort of dissect, right? It's hard to slice that. Were people more oppressed under the Shah? Were they less oppressed under the Shah? I think perhaps I think perhaps sort of comparing it's like apples and oranges. I mean, there's more of a general oppression of people underneath the Ayatollahs and the Iranian theocracy, but the instance of true horrendous oppression, like the atrocities committed by the Shah, were probably worse in single instances. So how do you even compare something like that? Yeah, it's very, very difficult to say, but you know, you've got to let's not forget who put the Shah there.
The only reason why that question would be relevant is because if Professor Dershowitz's real goal in pretending to convince you he wants a pinpoint strike on Iran's nuclear program is in fact what he's admitted, which is a regime change in Iran. And then the question becomes, oh, do we want to once again have the CIA impose a savage and brutal dictatorship on Iran? I guess the question for whether the world was better off under the Shah was who you are. If you were Israel and the CIA, outstanding. I would love the Shah if I were.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got a real point. And you know, consider that Dershowitz has just admitted that yes, he wants a regime change in Iran, and the you know, he's advocating for a violent regime change, not from internal uprising of the people, but instigating that regime change on the country. It is incredible that they still haven't learnt that you cannot implement regime change through these policies on another country. Like they want to put the son of the Shah back in power. It is wow.
Israel and the CIA. He did the United States' bidding. If you were a dissident in Iran, if you were somebody who was religious in Iran, if you were critical of the government in Iran, things were extremely grim for you because dissidents were savaged and brutalized in prison. And that was why they were so many people.
Let me ask you a follow-up question. If there were an open and free election today in Iran, would the Ayatollah be elected? Or if there were an election, even as you put it, between the brutal Shah and the nice Ayatollahs?
Okay, so look at that straw man. He's saying the nice Ayatollah. Nobody said the Ayatollahs were nice, right? Nobody said that on the stage. This is deceptive because he's saying, which would you rather, the Ayatollahs or the Shah? And then he's gone on to say, well, your nice Ayatollahs. Greenwald didn't say that. That is not even remotely close to what Greenwald said. So we've got to pay attention to those kind of tricks. Nobody said the Ayatollahs were nice, right? Nobody said that.
Who do you think would win the election in Iran today?
I didn't say the Ayatollahs were nice or nice Ayatollahs.
Who would win the election?
I think that
who would win?
I'm not a pollster even in the United States.
You're talking about democracy. Who would win?
I don't think we know what the population. But hold on. You can't just constantly interrupt. What I want to say is that if you look.
Yeah, nice. Stand up. At a point you've got to call people out for this kind of stuff. Dershowitz has been very reductionist, right? He's sort of basically saying, well, the people would vote to have the Shah back. I'm not so sure they would. I don't know. I don't know who would win that vote if they had a fair and free election. The problem is that nobody's been able to get a poll of the Iranian people. Like, how do you even pretend to know who that they would vote for? I suspect they would vote for whoever's not the American choice for them out of sheer principle, which, you know, you can imagine if you have a country with a history of the CIA. And don't forget, Dershowitz openly acknowledges that the CIA overthrew the democratically elected government in Iran to install the Shah, a dictator who was the royal family, who was brutal to the people. You know, you might, the people of Iran, and I don't know, this is the thing, and Greenwald's correct by saying, I don't know, because we can't poll them to find out, because there are no free and fair polls that will take an accurate reading of them. How exactly do we do that? But they might go, hey, the Ayatollahs might be horrible theocrats, but at least they're not picked by the Americans to run our country. They may very well say that. But, you know, Dershowitz has been very reductionist here and go, well, you got to pick one or the other. Well, yeah, I mean, I get his point, but it's very sort of, you know, just, well, if we can't have one, then we've got to do this thing. No.
Look at history, what you will find is that the world is better off, is worse off, and the countries are worse off when we in the United States, working with Israel, go into countries and impose the governments that we want on those countries. There's
right. And that's the whole point. That every single time it has been worse, not better, when America has gone in and chosen people's governments for them based upon not what the people need, but what America wants. That's a problem. That's a big problem. And that has caused nothing but disaster. And these war hawks like Dershowitz are still singing the same tune. What makes it any different? Like, I would love to ask him a question and say, what makes it different than Iraq or the first time they tried this in what are our guardrails for ensuring that it doesn't just fall back into chaos again?
hardly anything that I can imagine more brutal and savage and bad than that. So certainly I wouldn't want to live under the rule of the Ayatollah, but I also don't want Israel and the CIA picking Iran's leaders for it.
But yeah, all right.
Oh, yeah. Okay, fantastic. Actually, we've got a couple of new members. We've got Starsong, became a YouTube member. Thank you so much, Starsong. Much love. And Barnaby Wild, welcome. Enjoy your readership. Enjoy your emotes and all of your little things there. Yeah, thank you so much, Barnaby. Really appreciate it. And hello to everybody joining me. I'm in a bit of a fugue state, to be honest with you. I'm kind of tired, but that's okay. I really wanted to do the part 2 of this because it's such an important question, and it's so interesting that people are out there like this.
Do you want to ask a question of Alan?
I have a question for Professor Dershowitz.
Sure.
If I could.
Sure, please.
No question? No, you want to ask a question?
Do I want to ask? Yes, I definitely want to ask a question.
Lay the question. Go ask it.
Okay. So the resolution that we're debating, that we're asking everybody to vote on, is that the United States should go and bomb Iran's nuclear facilities. But isn't it true that the reason you want that is because you actually want the United States and Israel to go in, as you told Newsmax 3 weeks ago, and facilitate, you want to remove the government of Iran and replace it with a more pro-Israel government, right? That's your real goal.
There's no question that it's a 2-step process. I want to make sure, first of all, that be very clear about it. I want to be very clear that first step is if the current Iranian regime remains the regime, I don't want them to have nuclear weapons. But if we could bring about regime change, I would prefer that to.
Well, here's the thing: we don't know that we don't think they have nuclear weapons. And during the first part of this debate, Dershowitz sort of said, "Yeah, but it's about not just preemptive attack, like attacks because you think someone may be about to attack you, but preventative attacks. You're attacking someone to make sure they are in no position to attack you, to prevent their ability to attack you at all." So he's sort of saying, yeah, they don't have a nuclear weapon now, but let's nuke all of their nuclear facilities and you know, stuff like that, so they will never get their hands on one. And I don't think they have their hands on one, and I don't think this sort of slippery slope all the way down to them using one is so tenuous at best. And as Greenwald pointed out, we had a program of working with Iran with checks and made sure that they weren't developing nuclear weapons as part of their nuclear program. Because if you're unaware, nuclear program doesn't mean nuclear weapons. It can also be developing uranium to use in nuclear power plants, which is basically what they have. You're basically they're basically working with the UN and the rest of the world, getting inspections, and they did everything right. Okay, they did everything right in those inspections. They weren't developing a nuclear weapon, and I think it is, isn't it a war crime to bomb a nuclear reactor? I'm sure it is a war crime. Yeah, the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation says like any other act of war, military action against nuclear facilities is subject to international humanitarian law. So it violates the idea that illegal use of force in any armed conflicts includes military necessity, and nuclear attacks on nuclear facilities is not a legitimate nuclear military objective. It is not. Like I really dislike the callousness at sort of, hey, let's bomb nuclear facilities and you know, who cares what happens to the Iranian people? Who cares if there's a meltdown? Who cares if, you know, wow, like seriously, you're just advocating war crimes at this point.
Bombing or destroying the nuclear reactor. We wouldn't have to. The Shah was
that's a war crime. That's literally a war crime.
Suppressing his own people. He wasn't trying to export Islamic oppression to the rest of the Middle East and ultimately to the rest of the world, because he calls the United States the great Satan. So yes, I would like to see regime change. It would be good for the Iranian people. And you haven't answered the question. What if it were true? What if it were true? No, don't interrupt me. Hypothetically, what if you could conduct a poll and I could conduct a poll, and it would be an honest poll, and the conclusion was that 70% of Iranian people would prefer to see the Shah or the Shah's son replace the current Ayatollah regime. And that what you were propping up essentially was a regime that is against the wishes of the Iranian people as well.
Excuse me, sir. What is wrong with this man? Like, he's just said, you're propping up this regime. He's not propping it up. He never said he supported the Ayatollah. This is the kind of stuff that you really watch out for, and sort of it has devolved into, like, seriously, Greenwald never said he would prop them up. In fact, like, he's advocating for things like sanctions, like, you know, okay, the way I would respond to this is basically, number one, I'm not suggesting in any way we prop them up. In fact, I think sanctions and basically relieving those sanctions for working with the international community to assure us that they don't have nuclear weapons is way more important. That's not propping them up. The language that Dershowitz is using is very dishonest. So point that out. Hey, that's dishonest. And he's already done one dishonest thing by saying the nice sort of Ayatollahs, when that is not what Greenwald said. But I'd also point out, not only are you not propping them up, that if you polled the people of Iran, I don't know where the poll would be. Just say it was 70%. How much of those 70% would agree to have their nuclear facilities bombed in order to change the regime? Probably none of them, right? So that's the thing. I think that if you have 70% of the people, you can support them if they do want to overthrow the totalitarian regime. You can support them with weapons. You can support them with limited actions. But bombing their nuclear facilities is not what they want. I can tell you right now that no country's people is going to say, yes, we want to overthrow this regime, bomb our nuclear facilities. What is wrong with this man? Like, seriously. Oh, boy.
How would you respond to that?
Nobody has
It's
any
not
idea
a
what
question of democracy, because we don't know what democracy would produce in Iran. We've never had it.
That's not a question, Dershowitz. He's just going on to answer his own question. This guy is horrible. He's absolutely horrible.
Exactly. I totally agree with that last statement. Nobody knows what democracy would produce in Iran. But the only thing that I would ask you when you go to vote, because what he's telling you is the real purpose of this bombing campaign is regime change.
No.
And if you, yes, that is what you're saying.
Stop interrupting him, Dershowitz. Like, you can see who the person is that wants to just. He really is being horrible in this conversation. Greenwald's being very, very respectful. Dershowitz is just, wow.
Real motive.
No,
that is where it will end up, because there is.
Where is the moderator in all of this? Hello, can we have a moderator be, droned in or whatever? Like, can we please have a moderator in the room? Please, moderator, anywhere, anyone, moderator to stage front. What is going on here? Like, serious? This is supposed to be a serious. Where is this? It's supposed to be like at a serious, forum kind of thing. This looks like an absolute debacle.
Hold on.
Okay, let me answer.
There's no plan that would actually achieve any benefits that they want to achieve without removing the current Iranian government. That's what he said to Newsmax, was the only way we can achieve these benefits that we're trying to achieve is if we change the government, even though the current government had an agreement with the United States that was working. So I would ask you, when you go to vote on whether or not you think that the United States efforts over the last 50 years to bring regime change to the world or to bomb other countries in this world has turned out to be good for those countries, has turned out to be good for those regions, and has turned out to be good for the United States. And if you think the answer is yes, vote with him. Vote with him to have another one of these kinds of wars.
Yeah, so I think Greenwald's making an excellent point. It's kind of like, I mean, Dershowitz is basically saying, hey, this will be good for all the rest of the thing. We can't leave people without the freedom to choose what they want in a democratic process because we think this would be better for them. That's where, America's kind of we'll give people freedom by force kind of thing has gone horribly, horribly wrong, like just catastrophically wrong. Wow. Yeah, and so again, the question I would have is what makes this different than all the other times that the US and other countries, Western countries, have tried to impose regime change throughout the Middle East? Like, what makes this time different?
That is what he's advocating.
I don't care how you vote.
Okay,
that's
okay,
up to you.
That's excuse me, Professor Dershowitz.
You're a tad bit late there, moderator. Congratulations. That response time.
Professor
I want
Dershowitz,
to respond.
Professor Dershowitz, you care how you vote, but you want to respond to that.
I just want to respond
Okay,
to that.
respond, and then I want
There are
to do
two
prerogatives. I want to do.
independent goals. One does not depend on.
And he's interrupting the moderator. This is clown show. This is stuff you'd see a modern day debate. A modern day debate has better moderation than this currently does. That's it's a Soho forum, a very sort of prestigious forum.
The other. I think it will be very difficult to achieve regime change. That's why I want to make sure that the current regime doesn't have a nuclear arsenal.
Okay. I have
the second stage, which is a desirable thing for the people of Iran and for the world and for the Middle East, is to have regime change and to introduce some form of democracy to Iran.
Okay, we heard
with
about
elections and not theocracy.
I just my moderator's prerogative to ask two brief questions, one of each. Glenn Greenwald, do you disagree strongly with those who claim that the record shows that Iran is Nazi-like toward Israel and wishes and wants and would further the goal of destroying Israel as a state? Do you agree with that view or disagree?
I think Israel hates a lot of its enemies. They hated Saddam Hussein. They wanted him gone. They wanted Syria and Assad gone. And I think Iran hates Israel as well. They're enemies. There's no question about that, which is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why the moderator's bringing up Nazi-like. I basically, are they enemies? Absolutely. does Iran want to destroy, like, genocide every Jew in the world? I don't think so. I think it's very complicated. I think, but what we're talking about is whether the Iranian people want to, whether that is something that the people do want to do, and I don't think it is, even if some of the Ayatollahs do. I don't know about that. Like, do they despise Israel? Absolutely. Do they want to genocide them? I don't think so. I don't think so.
It's precisely why Alan Dershowitz wants the United States military to go and take out another enemy of Israel and replace it with a region like a government like Saudi Arabia, like the United Arab Emirates, like Egypt, that are dictatorships that answer to the West and do Israel's bidding. And that is an extremely dangerous way to continue to conduct foreign policy. And I think all of history is on my side.
So you're thinking Iran is a danger to Israel? It is a danger to Israel, Iran.
I mean, for a long time, we were told that Saudi Arabia hated Israel. They had the same devotion to destroying Israel as Iran does. And Saudi Arabia is now engaged in diplomatic relations because of the attempt to bring Saudi Arabia into the international community. If you go and look at the other options.
Yeah, and let's not forget that the Saudi Arabian is a brutal sort of, I mean, I hesitate to say theocracy, but it definitely is an aristocracy. The royal family of Saud basically has an iron grip on the entire country. And I mean, they're probably not as bad as Iran. It's very hard to be comparable, but it's not like the US is like, well, we want freedom for the people. Because the Sauds worked with the US, they don't care if the Saudi people are under the thumb of the Sauds or not. They don't care. Like, can we stop pretending this is for freedom? Like, I really think we've got to stop pretending that.
My option is not some illusory option. It actually happened in reality. I read you the studies that when there was an Iran deal to lift sanctions on them and bring them back into the international community, every single inspection agency, including the IAEA, that tried to convince the world that Saddam Hussein didn't have nuclear weapons before 2002, says that Iran gave up its nuclear aspirations, was allowing inspectors into those facilities. And
yeah, and that's the IAEA is the International Energy IAEA International Atomic Energy Agency. Yeah, and they did say, in fact, all of the agencies, like international agencies before the war in Iraq, said that there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. All of them said that. The United Nations inspectors said that. Everybody said that except for the people like Dershowitz and the US pundits that sort of, wow. Like,
that's what I think is a far more promising option than starting another war in the Middle East.
Don't you actually think, and tell the truth now, don't you actually think it would be better if Israel didn't exist as the nation state of the Jewish people?
No, I don't. Absolutely don't think that. I've never suggested that, anything like that in my life. And if I wanted to advocate that, I would have no problem with telling everybody I do in favor of that. I don't hide what I think, unlike you when you're advocating for bombing when you really want regime change. But I would have no problem. No, I don't want Israel to.
Look, he asks him a question and then Dershowitz just interrupts him. Like, no, we don't think Israel shouldn't exist. But at the same time, we don't think Iran should be bombed either. This is the thing. Like, it's the fallacy is kind of black and white thinking. Just because you're not with everything that Israel is doing doesn't mean that you don't think the nation should exist. And just because you don't want to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities doesn't mean that you're for them. Right? Like, this is the sort of very simplistic thinking that they're pushing through. You can take a nuanced approach and say, hey, I don't like Iran. I think it is a horrible dictatorship. I think it is a theocracy that shouldn't be able to oppress their people. But at the same time, is going in and bombing them the best for those people? And we've got to stop doing, well, what's best for us? What's best for our outcomes? What's best for what we want when it comes to other countries? And say, well, what's best for their people?
Professor
for a
Dershowitz.
nuclear-armed Iran. Let me put the question a little differently.
Okay, excuse me.
Let me put the question a little differently.
You've asked a question. I have a brief question for you, Professor Dershowitz. Do you see an irony? Do you see an irony in your stating that Iran is the new Nazi Germany, but alongside your confidence that all we have to do is destroy the nuclear facility, and this new Nazi Germany will then be so nice and cooperative that they will then no longer try for nuclear facility?
I do not
see an irony in that.
I do not believe that Iran is the new Nazi Germany. I do not believe that there will ever be another Nazi Germany because of Israel. Israel has the strength and the ability that the Jewish community did not have in the 1930s. It would prevent
my question
Iran
was
from becoming the new Nazis.
Yeah, okay. I don't know about that one, Chief. I think that when it's in another country, it's very difficult to do so. I don't think anything's the new Nazi Germany. I guess he was talking about, didn't he bring this up? Like Iran wanted Israel destroyed, or maybe
They could, they would, and don't believe me, believe them.
I'm sorry.
Let me finish, please.
Yeah,
Elie Wiesel once said,
he hasn't let anybody finish their statements during this entire thing, and he wants to. Yeah, wow, just awful, Dershowitz, just awful.
always believe the threats of your enemies more than the promises of your friends. And the Jewish people have learned from terrible experiences to believe the threats of their enemies. And Iran has threatened genocide, destruction of Israel, the end of the Israeli people and the end of the Jewish people. And Israel has to take that seriously. And the United States, as Israel's closest ally, has to help them avoid that genocide.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, we've got to believe Iran when they said they would, but who's the threat coming from? This is the question, because you're talking about bombing their nuclear facilities, which A, provides them with power, and B, not to mention all of the horrible, let's call it collateral damage that happens when all of this. I don't think most Iranians have any problem with the Jewish people. I don't think so. Do you think maybe a lot of their sort of hang-ups have been the things that well, not just Israel, but the things that the United States have done to them over the course of this, last, I don't know, 50 years or so?
Apologies for keeping you waiting in the audience. Let's start here. Please ask your question. Ask a question. No need to identify yourself.
Sure. First of all, I can't let pass, Glenn, your assertion that Iran is not a militant force in the world. Just ask the people of Lebanon. You live in Brazil. It is the #1 place for a Lebanese diaspora, and that's because Iran and its proxy, Hezbollah, has totally ruined life for the Lebanese. So here are my questions. One is, can you square the contradiction, Glenn, in two of your statements? One is that the United States, maybe Israel, have...
I don't know. Did Greenwald ever said that they weren't a militant force? I mean, he sort of said, hey, they were working with the international community about nuclear weapons, but did he ever say they weren't a militant force? I don't think he did.
Conspire to force Iran into desperation into pursuing a nuclear policy. You cited those statistics from the Washington Post. They now have 7,000 scientists and billions of dollars. There is a momentum, there is a desperation, and yet they're always so far away. They're so desperate that they're never going to get nuclear weapons. We always say they're going to get nuclear weapons. It never happens. Just like North Korea was, we always said they would get nuclear weapons, and guess what? They got nuclear weapons. So one is, as a debater, you don't have to be logically consistent, but will you at least acknowledge it's a logical inconsistency to say that Iran is so desperate to get the weapons, and yet you also paint a picture where they're not going to?
That's your question.
Wow, this is just somebody going and saying, oh yeah, no, you're not only that. So Dershowitz, the man on the left, has long time been an advisor to the government. He's probably the most famous lawyer in the United States. He's not only suggested bombing Iran, but basically bombing their nuclear facilities and doing regime change in Iran, like invading and forcibly removing the government. So yeah, it's not just a sort of idle, an idle thing. And that's sort of before they even have nuclear weapons. So he's talking about not just a preemptive strike, but a preventative strike, one to ensure that they will never be able to develop nuclear weapons.
I have a question for Dershowitz.
Forgive me, sir. You only get one question. The question is put to Glenn. Answer the question, Glenn.
So first of all, you're extremely confused about the studies that I cited. They had nothing to do with Iran. The massive increase in the amount of money being spent to develop nuclear weapons and to hire scientists to develop nuclear weapons was not in Iran, but in Iraq. And all of that happened after the Israeli strike in 1981 on the Iraqi nuclear reactor. That is when Iraq decided that it needed nuclear weapons because there was a country in the region called Israel that had shown they believed in the right to attack any country that they want. Secondly, I didn't say that Iran has never exhibited any aggression. In fact, I said the opposite, that they definitely have. I said, however, that it is bizarre to me to be a citizen of the United States and to accuse other countries of being maniacal about war and constantly starting war when no country on the planet has started more wars or has pursued more wars over the last 50 years than the United States. What I was saying is...
He's not wrong. Like, and this guy who stood up, wow, what an ass. He basically got the statistics wrong, got the country wrong. Wow.
What I was saying was I was just...
And just for my money, I don't think there's any problem about, hey, like Iran's desperately trying to get nuclear weapons, but it hasn't reached, it's not near to doing so. Like, it's not like, you know, that those two things are not logically contradictory. That's not a contradiction. You know, it's like me desperately wanting to learn physics, but I'm nowhere near learning, you know, that's not a contradiction. So I don't know what this guy in the audience is talking about.
Refuting Professor Dershowitz's attempt to depict Iran as this completely irrational, utterly apocalyptic, extremist regime, completely unhinged from any rational considerations, willing to blow up the entire world. Nothing suggests that they do that. In fact, their retaliation against Israel was far more constrained, the one we just saw, than most countries in the world would have launched after their embassy was bombed. It doesn't mean Iran is a good country or a nice country. It means that the depiction of them as this Nazi Germany, and I don't understand why, if he's saying they're not Nazi, if he's admitting now they're not Nazi Germany, why the whole beginning of his speech was wanting you to think what we should do if there was another Nazi Germany. Exactly, they're not Nazi Germany. And that's why the paradigm of, oh, what we would do with Hitler, what would we do with Nazi Germany, is totally inapplicable because we don't have another Nazi Germany in the Middle East. Like I said, every...
Yeah, and he did his, if you didn't see part one, his speech was all, you know, in World War II, the Jewish people were wiped out by the Nazis. And you know, there's another country who could end Israel with one nuclear weapon. If they get this nuclear weapon, they hand it off to, you know, he was the one that brought Nazi Germany into this. So it's really disingenuous then to say, well, I never, like, he absolutely did bring up that Iran was like a Nazi Germany. He absolutely did.
Time they want you to start a new war, they tell you that this new leader is a new Hitler, and it never proves to be true.
Okay,
can I respond to that, please?
Comment.
Can I respond to that? Okay.
Yes, and that's what we always do.
Greenwald said that that Iran knew that its drones would be intercepted. That is so preposterous. Iran could not have known that Jordan, that Saudi Arabia, that other countries would stop the drones. They intended to murder civilians all through Israel, including Arab civilians and Israeli civilians. And he says the reason was because Israel bombed the embassy. No, Israel didn't bomb the embassy. It bombed a building that was distantly associated with the embassy that was being used as a military headquarters. And let's remember who started that. Which is the first country that took over another country's embassy? I think it's called Iran. And it started with the Ayatollahs taking American prisoners, hostages, American diplomats, hostages. So don't tell.
Oh, are we going back to, are you talking about Benghazi? What is he talking? Is Iran? Is he going back to 1980 to sort of? The compound in 1980, on 1979. Are you serious? Are you serious? Like, what are you doing? You're basically saying that Israel bombing Iran is justified because back in 1980, that Iran. What the hell? Are you serious right now? That is the worst excuse for kicking off hostilities again. Well, they did. They started it.
Me that Iran deliberately sent a few kites up in order to somehow send a message to Israel, but it never intended to kill anybody. That's absurd. And Israel had the perfect right at that point, legally and morally, to retaliate overwhelmingly. Proportionality does not require when somebody sends 300 rockets and drones that you send 280. They could send 10,000 in response. What proportionality means is that when you're attacking a target that has both civilians and military, that you have to evaluate the military value of the target against the civilian casualties that were anticipated. Iran declared war on Israel by sending all those rockets. Thankfully, Israel, Jordan, the United States, and other countries deflected those and prevented all these deaths from occurring. But you cannot sit here and justify the claim that Iran.
Okay, hold on. Israel did an airstrike on their embassy in Damascus in Syria. I want you to think about this. Like, they bombed their embassy in Syria. And what was the military facility? I don't. What was this military facility? Okay, so Israel said that the military facility was neither a consulate nor an embassy, but a military building of QUDS forces disguised as a civilian structure in Damascus. The Arab League, the European Union, Gulf Cooperation Council. Okay, so a lot of independent people labeled it as a condemn the attack. So diplomatic premises like homes and schools are considered civilian objects under international law. A UN commissioned panel of experts on international law consisting of Ben Stoll, Morris, a whole bunch of people, wrote that Israel provided no legal justification for the attack and had failed to report to the United Nations Security Council. In their view, it violated Article 2.4, banning recourse to force against another state. They also issued a warning that Israeli officials involved in the strike might have committed crimes. The subsequent Iranian retaliation was also, in their view, prohibited under international law, since self-defense is only justified to deter continuing attacks. And the strike on the Iranian embassy had ended 12 days later. Yeah, no, it wasn't right to strike back either. Like, he's not saying that it's right. It's just, like, and now he's quoted an incident from the late 1970s, early 1980s as being the, like, come on now. Like, I don't think it was right that Iran shot missiles at Israel. No, it's not. And I don't think, I mean, they could be sort of confident they would be stopped. I don't think they went, well, we know they'll be stopped, like Greenwald is saying. I don't think so. But let's not forget, hey, like, the bombing of the embassy was not good either.
Iran did not want to kill Israelis, that it sent these hundreds of drones knowing they would all be miraculously stopped. Can you justify that?
Yeah, what I want to say is if Iran has such a primitive army that they're not capable of landing even a single missile inside Israel because all they have is a bunch of crappy drones and slow missiles that can be removed from the sky by Jordan and by the United Arab Emirates, then they're hardly an imposing country. The reality is
All
that
you need is one.
Hezbollah,
All you need is one to get through.
Alan, please.
One. That's all you need.
Hezbollah has hundreds of tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of highly sophisticated missiles pointed directly at every single major Israeli city, including Tel Aviv. If Iran wanted to do a kind of response against Israel that you're suggesting they wanted, they had that capability and they didn't because they're a rational, restrained country that didn't want to end up in a world war. I know. The only rational, restrained countries are America, Israel, and the West. That's what your media tells you all the time. So I know that you believe that. But there are actually other rational, restrained countries in the world too. You're always told there's a new Hitler in Iran. There's a new Hitler in Russia. There's a new Hitler named Hamas. There's a new Hitler in Syria. And you believe it all the time. And you stand up and you cheer all those evil, irrational countries. As I said, if you look at who the ones are who are starting wars, it is your country, the United States, and along with Israel as well. And that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. The United States starts a lot of wars. I'm sorry. It just does. It does. And you know, this whole rhetoric about sort of, you know, but here's the thing. Nobody is saying that Iran is a nice government. He's not wrong that Iran could have done more to its strike at Israel after their embassy got bombed. We know that they could have done more. They didn't. They did do a restrained attack back, like it was restrained. Now, I don't think they knew that they would stop all the drones, but I think that they knew that it would not be, you know, an incredibly massive destructive thing. And can I just point out that under the Trump administration, they assassinated one of their generals, right? One of their generals, they assassinated him. That was Soleimani. Yeah, so he was briefed that they were in a flight from Syria to Iran. Trump didn't notify the top Congress leaders. He didn't. And he just killed him. I'm sure that'll settle things down. That's the kind of thing. That's the kind of thing that'll make a country really work with you. Is just blowing the crap out of one of their main generals on a flight.
That is just the reality if you remove yourself from Western propaganda.
Next question. Question here, please.
Right. After the U.S. assassinated Qasem Soleimani, many predicted that U.S. and Iran
And that's what the person talking about, Soleimani, is talking
would
about.
get into a war. That would be disastrous, but that never happened. Why would it be the case that the U.S. can get away with taking out Iranian nuclear facilities without triggering a war?
I guess it's your question, Alan.
Oh, well, targeted killings are preferable, obviously, to mass killings. And if you
Listen to this absolute horse shit. Like, targeted killings are preferable to mass killings. Well, yeah, but that doesn't make them, like, he speaks so blithely about them when you're not the one whose family is being killed. Can we stop for a second and go, hey, these people will have family? And this is what sort of during Iraq that was just ignored. You can't just go in and say, hey, we'll keep casualties to a minimum. It'll be fine. It never works like that.
can target the scientists who are about to endanger the civilians in your country without endangering civilians, that's far less undesirable.
Scientists are civilians, you horse's ass. Oh my God. Like, oh, these scientists, they're all military. I don't think they are. They're just scientists, dude. Oh, for freak's sake.
Desirable than massive attacks. And Israel did manage to, and the United States did manage to kill people who are in charge of terrorism from countries. And Israel did manage to destroy the North Korean nuclear facility that had been sent to Syria with minimum damage and no retaliation. And so the idea that if the United States, with Israel's help, were to surgically destroy or postpone, you can never, you're right, you can never destroy completely, totally the potential for nuclear proliferation. But neither Iraq nor Syria has developed a nuclear bomb since they were destroyed by Israel. And if the United States were to surgically attack the 6 or 7 areas that are mostly far away and destroy the current nuclear potential arsenal, it could postpone the development of a nuclear arsenal by 10 years or 15 years, and that's an eternity when it comes to saving lives. So I still argue that that would be the least worst of the very bad alternatives that are facing the United States and Israel today.
Any comment from you?
Yeah, but you're buying that time with lives. You're buying that time with people's lives. You are sacrificing people in order to delay that. And there's, as Greenwald pointed out, there's other ways to do it. Like, if we work with them, there's diplomatic ways to ensure that they're not developing nuclear weapons. And until Trump shut it down, it was working. It was actually producing results.
Glenn.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, this is the contradiction at the heart of this propaganda to try and convince you to send your own government, your own military to go attack Israel enemy in the Middle East, which is, on the one hand, we're being told that Iran is this religiously extremist, apocalyptic, monstrous cult that just was willing to blow up the world. And yet, on the other hand, you're supposed to believe that if the United States just goes and drops a few bombs on Iran and takes out all their nuclear facilities, killing however many Iranians we kill in the process, that they're just going to do nothing. They're just going to accept it and say, oh.
And can I also point out that is a war crime? Like, let's be serious about this. That is a war crime. Attacking somebody's nuclear facilities is a war crime. It is not. Attacking power plants is not a valid military target under international law. Like, why are we ignoring this? Wow.
I guess the United States bombed us. You remember, before the Iraq war, we were told that that war would end in a month or 2 months at the most, and we ended up fighting in Iraq for years. That is always what is done when they want you to convince you to do new wars. Oh, don't worry, it's just going to be a few people who die. It's going to be over very quickly. If Iran really is this great threat that he's telling you they are, this wildly irrational, crazed, religious extremist regime, don't you think that Iran will actually do some pretty extreme things in response to having the United States go and bomb it the way that we would do the same? Remember what happened we did after September 11th? They one-day attack on the United States. We launched 20 years worth of war in multiple Muslim countries all over the world. Why would Iran just sit by and...
He's got a point. I mean, 9/11, like, here's the thing. Only a couple of thousand people died, and the aftermath of that, of the wars launched, millions of people died. Millions. Wars are never just this surgical strike that is just clean and cut and swift. It almost never happens like that. And I don't see why it would happen in Iran like that.
Except are going and bombing their country without starting major instability and major war in the Middle East. There is always these contradictions at the heart of a war they want to sell you. It's like a used car. Oh, don't worry, this used car is fantastic. And then you get it and everything breaks down. That has been the case for every war they've sold you over the last 50 years.
There's a very simple answer. There's a very simple answer, and it's the answer you don't like. And that is, if the United States and Israel were to destroy Iran's nuclear arsenal in its current form, it would be a very important first step toward regime change. And regime change would bring about a glorious peace throughout the Middle East.
Okay.
That is impossible with
Wow.
Iran and the current regime.
Oh, yes, yes. The glorious peace. Yeah, no, just change one more regime in the Middle East. It'll be perfect, right? Just go in, get rid of those bad dictators, Why do we have to do that? Didn't we do that already in Iraq? Wow. These people never learn. They do not learn. It's the same story again. And this is incredible mask-off situation. He wants to go in there and impose another government on another Middle Eastern country right next door to where they tried it last time, and it catastrophically failed. Catastrophically. And led to ISIS being formed. This is insane.
Regime in charge.
Just like happened with Iraq.
Let me finish. There is now a movement toward peace between Israel.
Well, you've been interrupting all this time, Dershowitz. I'm not surprised you did, but yeah,
Saudi Arabia.
So here's the interesting thing in a debate. Okay, so, I mean, this is sort of meta-analysis, sure, but if somebody is making a mistake like Dershowitz here, don't interrupt him. It's sort of Sun Tzu's Art of War said it best. If your opponent wishes to make a mistake, don't stop him, right? Let him go and then respond to it and hit him hard. This is the thing. You don't have to interrupt him. Let him make his mistake and then hit him. Don't stop him.
The Gulf states, possibly other countries as well. And if Iran were out of the picture, if the current regime were out of the picture, Israel could make peace with Lebanon. Israel could make peace with Iraq. It would be the best possible thing that could happen.
Israel, I don't think Israel is making peace with Lebanon and Iraq. Wow.
For world peace. Is it certain? Absolutely not. But is it fairly certain that if Iran remains in power and develops a nuclear arsenal, we're in for a catastrophic reaction in terms of not only the Middle East, but in many other parts of the world.
Next
so
question.
The question is the risk-benefit ratio.
Okay.
I think this is a hard question. Glenn thinks it's an easy question. If you agree with him, it's an easy question.
Yeah, this is semantics by Dershowitz. He's already said he doesn't care about the vote. Now, for some reason, he just suddenly cares about it. And two, he's just like, I don't think Greenwald thinks it's an easy question. I think he's straw manning again.
Vote for him.
All right. Next question.
Good evening, gentlemen. My question is for Professor Dershowitz.
Yeah.
And it touches on some of the necessary practicalities. The Iranian nuclear facilities like Natanz are deeply, deeply buried.
Yeah.
Quite possibly beyond the reach of conventional ordnance.
That's right.
And if the only reliable way, as you said, was to strike them, would you be willing to see the U.S. conduct a nuclear
No.
strike?
No.
Undoubtedly resulting in fallout spread by the prevailing winds?
No, absolutely not. I don't think either Israel or the United States should have a first strike nuclear attack. And that's why Israel asked the United States for bunker busting bombs.
No, Beamsy, they do have operating reactors. I don't know who told you that. That's a list of their reactors. They've got 2 operational, and one of them is being built. So they definitely have, and that was updated the 3rd of May, so that's definitely current. Might want to check your facts there, buddy. Yeah, so this sort of one nuclear power plant is operating. Construction commenced on a second large Russian unit. The country also has a major program developing uranium enrichment, which was concealed for many years. Iran began limiting its enrichment-related activities and ceasing its work on heavy water-relating projects under the internationally agreed Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. However, following the USA's withdrawal from the agreement in 2018, thanks Trump, the country began enriching uranium again. That one move has done more to absolutely make the region unsafer than anything else. Like I cannot stress how horrible Trump has been for the entire world. Okay, well, I don't know why you'd say, I don't know why you'd say it wouldn't, you know, that it's not producing power though. So I don't.
That are conventional, but that can burrow through the ground and destroy the vast majority of the potential arsenal. Would it be complete? Of course not. But I would never favor either the United States or Israel taking a first nuclear step unless it were absolutely necessary to their self-preservation.
Then how would you get at those facilities that he just referenced were so far underneath the
Bunker
surface that
busting bombs.
Okay, so let me just say that you can paint a very glorious, optimistic, sunny picture of any war. And what I would hope you will do is look at all the studies that I read that said what caused more than anything else a desire for nuclear weapons in the Middle East was when Israel did the kind of strike that he's talking about doing in Iran, in Iraq, because the more you signal to countries that they are going to be vulnerable without nuclear weapons, that is when they say, oh, if I were North Korea, they wouldn't be attacking me. If I were Pakistan, they wouldn't be attacking me because they have nuclear weapons. That's what provides this nuclear arms race, is creating a militarized world.
That's just...
Yeah, he's not wrong. You know, the whole point is that the US will not take actions against countries with nuclear weapons. That they won't. And so that sends a message that, hey, if you want to have the US not choosing your government for you, you better have nuclear weapons. Or else the government's going to come in, the US is going to come in with the CIA, and they're going to decide who's in charge. And who's in charge is going to be good for the US. I don't think Greenwald's wrong. I think that Dershowitz has just got a really outdated idea of how to stop countries from developing nuclear weapons. Ugh.
Dead wrong historically. The reason the Saudis want a nuclear arsenal now is to protect themselves against Iran. If Iran didn't have nuclear potential and be just months or who knows away from a nuclear...
Oh, who knows? Months. Yeah, no, you don't know. And nobody knows. And we don't think they're even developing nuclear weapons. Wow.
Arsenal. The Saudis would not be asking for it, and the Emirates would not be asking for it. So it's exactly the opposite.
Next question.
A world without nuclear weapons. And you talked before about how everybody voted for a nuclear-free zone except the United States and Israel. Of course, because the United States and Israel are the only countries in the Middle East that have nuclear weapons. What do you expect? Of course, countries without nuclear weapons are going to vote for a nuclear-free zone. That doesn't take a lot of intelligence.
Next question.
Yeah, so everyone's sort of saying, hey, let's de-escalate on the species killing nuclear arsenals around the world, non-proliferation, and the US and Israel are saying, no, we're not giving them up. We want our weapons. Don't you think the US has a large enough military without nuclear weapons? Like, what? I just... I don't know.
Yeah, this question is for Alan Dulles. Alan Dershowitz. So considering we have 30,000 U.S. troops, service men and women in the Middle East, in Jordan, Syria, Iraq, UAE, how many of these service men and women are you willing and comfortable to sacrifice for Israel?
I'm not going to
in
answer.
the immediate retaliation that Iran is definitely going to take, and with its militias in the region against our U.S. American service men and women in the region.
You have forfeited your right to ask me a question by calling me Alan Dulles. I'm not going to respond to name calling. I was a strong opponent of both Dulles brothers, and I'm simply not going to dignify your absurd...
Who's he talking about? Dulles brothers. I don't know who that is. If somebody knows what the reference was, fill me in.
Comment question with a serious answer. Who's next?
It's a question. Like, answer the frigging question seriously. Do you expect to have losses after the militias retaliate for bombing of Iran in these other?
I don't support that ad hominem, but I do want to make a comment about the substance just very quickly, which is that when I keep talking about what happened with the Iraq War, I just want everyone to remember that Iran is a country 3 times as large with far more sophisticated military capabilities, not just inside Iran, but all throughout the Middle East. And if you thought that the Iraq War was going to last 2 weeks and you saw it last for 15 years because of the willingness of people to react when their own country is attacked and bombed and defended, what Iraq was able to do was a tiny fraction of what Iran will be able to do and likely will do all throughout the Middle East, including, as the questioner suggested, where our own soldiers are. This is a fantasy war he's selling you and not the real war, as we've seen throughout history over and over. It's so easy to make claims about the future, but none of it has ever happened in the past. We've never had a dream war like the one he's selling you. So please look at history and see what happens when we do these things.
That assumes no regime change. If you have regime change, you have a different situation. The United States bombed Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Berlin, and we had regime change.
Next question.
You're bringing up bombing of civilians with nuclear weapons is not the best choice there, champ. Wow. I don't know. I just can't see Iran being the same as the Japanese government and just sort of, you know, going, okay, sure. But you dodged the question, Dershowitz. I don't know why he's trying to respond now. And again, cutting off Greenwald on what he was saying.
Suddenly, America's 2 greatest allies were Germany and Japan. And so, yes, you can defeat an ideology. And yes, you can defeat a regime and bring about peace by the right surgical military approach.
Next question.
I don't know about that one, champ. I don't think that a surgical strike and then a change of regime in Iran is going to work. And I don't think I think it will go more like Iraq. It really would.
Hey, this question is for Glenn. Let's say that an Iran deal did in the past or could in the future actually work as intended. The last time around, it didn't stop the IRGC from murdering political dissidents, raping women as political punishment, and hanging gay people from ropes in the town square. So how would you reconstitute a deal that didn't condemn these people to living under a regime that, according to the people actually living under it, does in fact feel a lot like a tyrannical, fundamentalist, Nazi-like regime?
So I guess I would say to you that if you think the United States should go around the world changing all the regimes that are extremely barbaric and repressive to its people, we shouldn't only do Iran. Some of the countries that are closest,
how about ones that export terrorism?
Alan, let him finish his answer.
Some of the countries that are closest to the United States, the ones that he has been citing as the good countries, the one he wants to replicate, like Saudi Arabia. Go look at how dissidents are treated in Saudi Arabia. Do you think women are well treated in Saudi Arabia? Do you think gay people are treated well in Saudi Arabia? Or go look at Egypt, where dissidents are murdered by the hundreds or the thousands. There's zero press freedom. There's not a single dissident in Egypt that is anything but arrested or killed. So this idea that the United States is going to go around the world and we're going to take out the bad regimes, even though some of our closest allies and partners have and always have been and still are some of the most savage regimes in the world.
Yeah, so Dershowitz doesn't want him to say what he wants to say, because what he's going to say is, you know, look at the Saudis. They're the biggest partner America has in the Middle East. Like, why are we pretending that we're going to install why are you pretending you're going to install a regime that's friendly to women and human rights and gay people and all of this kind of stuff? Why are you pretending that you want a regime for the people? Because let's face it, it's not going to be a regime for the people. It's going to be a regime for the US and, you know, Israel. Come on. Like, Greenwald's not wrong, but Dershowitz doesn't want him to talk. It's insane.
Put your finger on the precise
Can I just finish? Let me finish.
And then
Alan, you'll get your moment to respond.
You've had a lot of moments. I just want I think it's an important point, because if you think that the reason to go bomb Iran is because they're a oppressive government, then we should go bomb a lot of countries in the world, be the world's policeman, take out all of the countries. Iran is by far not the most repressive regime on the planet. They're extremely repressive. You do not want to be a dissident in Iran, that's for sure. But there are a lot of countries that are at least as bad, if not worse, including the ones that he wants to replicate in the Middle East. The reality is he doesn't care, and the US government doesn't care if a country is dictatorial or tyrannical. We have supported and installed dictatorial regimes all throughout the world. We don't care if a country is free. What we care about is whether the dictatorship serves the interests of Israel and the United States.
So
and that is what regime change is about.
You put your finger. You put your finger on the precise question. In a world where we judge things not by good, better, best, but by worse, worser, worsest, and unbelievably bad, the question is, what's worse? A country like Saddam Hussein's, where he oppresses its own people, and which is terrible. And we shouldn't have gone to war with Saddam Hussein. We went against the wrong country.
Did Dershowitz support the Iraq War? That's my question. Yeah, so he didn't oppose the war in Iraq. He did not even present a neutral opinion. Okay, so he did kind of support the war in Iraq. Yeah, the more I read about Dershowitz, the less impressed I am with the man. He supported getting a warrant to allow torture. Yeah.
It should have been Iran, or a country which exports terrorism around the world. And if you're going to be a policeman, you don't police people for what they do to their own citizens. There are courts for that. There are international courts, but you do make sure that countries can't hurt you and can't hurt your allies. And the difference between Iran and Iraq, or between Iran and Saudi Arabia, is Iran is the greatest exporter of terrorism in the history of the world. It's trying to hurt us. It's trying to hurt its neighbors. It's trying to hurt its allies. Whereas other dictatorships just work internally. All they want to do, even North Korea, all it cares about is preserving its little hermit empire, but they're not a great danger to us. Iran is a great, great danger to the United States, to Israel, to the countries in the Middle East, and to world peace. And if you can't understand the difference between countries that endanger others and countries that just endanger themselves. Now, if you endanger people as well, if you have a combination, if you have three things going for you: one, you're repressive of your own people; two, the people themselves want regime change. They want to see the Ayatollahs thrown out.
How do we know that? Like, yes, there's definitely uprisings by women and stuff. I don't think they particularly support the Ayatollahs, but I think they're more afraid of the US than they are of the Ayatollahs, to be honest with you. And you know, it's hard to blame them with this kind of rhetoric going on.
And three, they pose a great danger to other people. That trifecta is the perfect recipe for regime change, not to try to protect people from themselves. No, we shouldn't have regime change in Saudi Arabia because they don't endanger us or the people around them. But we should have regime change in Iran because they fit those three criteria.
Can I just very quickly? I'm sorry. I want to get to all the questions just very quickly. I'm so glad he's finally saying that what he really wants you to do is to vote for regime change. And there's a lot of there's a lot of examples of what happens when we try and do regime change. We were told we were going to go and make Iraq a better place. We were going to make Libya a better place. We were going to make Syria a better place. If you want to see the results of what really happens when the United States goes in and tries to change the regime of other countries, and those are much less powerful and smaller countries than Iran, go look at Iraq, go look at Libya, go look at Syria, and then you decide whether you want to replicate that yet again in the Middle East.
Yeah, it's never worked like that. That's the thing. And I think him talking about regime change for Germany and Japan, they're different situations. They're absolutely different situations than sort of a very fundamentalist sort of nations that, you know, I don't think, and let's face it, the America that was coming in to help Europe in World War II is a different one than one coming in to take oil from the Middle East. It's a different beast entirely. The regimes that America is putting in, say, Iraq, is different to the regime that sort of they're putting in Germany or Japan post World War II. They're not the same things, because America, when doing sort of, you know, World War II, really they were basically handing the country back. But, you know, don't forget, they've already done this once. Iran had a democratically elected government that wasn't particularly friendly to the United States, and the CIA overthrew that government and reinstalled the Shah, a brutal dictator, back into it. They overthrew democracy. So they've done this once before. And that's when the Ayatollahs took over after a violent uprising to overthrow the Shah. Dershowitz isn't just talking about putting a government for the people back in there. He's talking about he's had meetings with the Shah's son, so the next in line for the throne, to put him back in there. And they think he's going to be a nice guy. He's already admitted that this debate that he's met with the Shah's son.
Okay,
In Iran, the answer is yes. You do want to do that in Iran.
Apologies to those people who are still in line. This, unfortunately, will have to be our final question. Go ahead. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. So look, ever since post FDR, we've had a policy of kind of advocating for a first strike. After FDR died and we built the nuclear bomb, Bertrand Russell actually advocated for the United States to bomb the Soviet Union before they were able to develop the nuclear bomb, as a way of proving moral superiority. And then you've had people like Henry Kissinger afterwards, who in their NSSM 200 blankly call for depopulation, and that the United States has to take the role of starting wars and coups around the world.
What's your question?
To keep the population in check.
What's your question? What is your question?
Here's my question.
Jesus Christ, Dershowitz, shut up. Like, let him ask his, like, he's got no problem with people going on and on when it's in his needs. Like, this guy is so dishonest. Like, dude, what are you doing? What are you doing?
So we are influenced by neoconservative thinking of what you're saying, that we need to attack first. Therefore, don't you think Putin should attack the United States first, given that, you know, we're funding and arming Ukraine? So doesn't your logic, Mr. Dershowitz, also apply to the other countries that we are going after? And also, I want to answer to the question.
Excuse me. We heard your question.
Okay.
How many men and women would you commit, American soldiers? Would you commit?
Sorry, your question has been asked, sir.
No, it's a hard.
Well, yeah, and Dershowitz didn't answer it. He didn't answer it. He basically said, "Oh, it's an ad hominem attack." Like, he didn't answer it. And then Greenwald stepped in to answer and give some sort of feedback on the question. And Dershowitz interrupted him. This man is a child. Like, why? What are you doing? What are you doing, Dershowitz?
It's a hard point. Obviously, we do have, you know, great risks when we engage in any kind of preemptive or preventive attack. That always is the case. What I'm here to tell you is that there are great risks in not taking preemptive and preventive action. Those great risks were manifested by the outbreak of the Second World War, which was eminently preventable if we had just enforced the Versailles Treaty. And so I think we have to always carefully balance when we take preventive action. And the three criteria that I have talked about, it seems to me, satisfy those concerns.
Okay,
namely,
you mentioned those.
Make sure the people themselves in the country want.
And he just ignores the moderator. The moderator says, "Yes, we heard those three. Yes, you've made your point on those 3 points." He just ignores the moderator completely. This is a disgrace, quite frankly. But, you know, this is a war hawk just interrupting, being belligerent, just being absolutely horrible to everybody around him. Like, have some decorum, sir. You're supposed to be a respected lawyer, and you're not. I mean, this guy apparently worked for Trump. He's just ridiculously bad. Like, ridiculously bad.
Regime change, you have to make sure that the people in the country are deeply, deeply oppressed, and you have to make sure that the country is posing a great, great risk to others. And yes, there is the possibility that if you establish prevention as a paradigm, other countries will do the same. I'm about to publish a book called The Preventive State, How to Avoid Cataclysmic.
Oh, don't forget to tack on the shill at the end. Holy crap, dude. What the hell? But yeah, Dershowitz is emblematic of this neoconservative. Well, we'll just, preemptively attack everybody around us, and that'll prevent all of this kind of stuff. It doesn't. It doesn't.
Without giving governments too much power. And I go through all these issues about when it's appropriate to take preventive action. And I acknowledge it's a difficult question. The difference between us is I acknowledge it's hard and difficult and nuanced. And my distinguished opponent seems to think.
Okay, I'm going to do something politically incorrect and announce that we have an Iranian in the House who would like to ask the final question. Take it away.
Okay, so Greenwald never said it was easy, and never said it was simple, and never said any of this stuff. Like this straw manning is the worst part of this. Oh, the nice Ayatollahs. No, Greenwald never said they were nice. This is all simple. No, Greenwald never said it was simple. He said the best results we got was from working diplomatically with the Iranians to make sure they didn't develop a nuclear weapon. And they submitted to all the checks that they asked for. They submitted to all of the inspections that they asked for. Working with them was the best way to do that, whereas you reward them with lifting sanctions for working with the rest of the world. Peaceful, diplomatic ways. That's not saying, hey, it's simple and easy. It's incredibly difficult, but, it's not...
Thank
you so much for making the exception for me. My question actually has a few different sides. I'm probably one of the just few, if not the only Iranian here tonight.
It's only one question, please.
Yes, of course. My question is about your statement that Iran is a rational country and they would do something that is rational. I actually do believe you're right. What I have in mind is your understanding of their rationality. They are the enemy of the United States as they are the enemy of Israel. It's not one way or another. It's both of them. I was personally took out of my schoolyard in front of 300 people just because I didn't chant this to America when I was 13 years old. So are they a rational country? Yes, they are. But are you going to like the rational? I'm assuming not.
I think your question has been clear. It's intended for Mr. Greenbaum.
Yeah, but I think what he does have a point. Like, you're not going to like the rationale that they come up with, which is sort of death to America and America is our enemy. Like, I get that. I get that. But the whole point that he's trying to make is that if Iran helps make some kind of nuclear attack anywhere in the world, America will stomp them into the ground. Right, if they do something, or even look like they're imminently going to use a nuclear weapon, America and probably the rest of the world will absolutely destroy them, and they know it. Like, you can talk about the Ayatollahs thinking that they have, a sort of divine right to rule and stuff, but they know that any sort of attempt to use any nuclear weapon is going to get them stomped into the dirt. I don't think they're crazy enough to go, well, we're going to use this regardless of what happens. I think they are rational enough to know that if they do, it's why they didn't like that was Greenwald's point. Israel bombed their embassy in Damascus. Okay, they bombed their embassy. And now Israel says, hey, it was actually a fake embassy. Nobody agrees with that. But okay, right? In response, they launched a whole bunch of drones that Jordan and Saudi Arabia shot down. They could have launched missiles, they could have done more, but they knew that that would escalate the conflict. So it's really showing a rational country where they say, hey, we're going to respond, but we're going to respond in a measured way, right? They know damn well that if they try to attack with a nuclear weapon, the entire world is going to absolutely stomp them. Like there won't be a, I won't be sitting here going, well, the best way is to work peacefully. If Iran's shown to have nuclear weapons and tries to use one, I will be going, hey, they should be invaded and toppled. That is too dangerous to allow in the world. But I don't think they're that crazy. I think that what they're thinking is, I can't tell what the regime of Iran is thinking, but I think the rationale is probably, if we have a nuclear weapon, then Israel won't launch one against us. But this whole idea of bomb their nuclear facilities.
Greenwald, yes, go ahead.
So obviously, every time the United States wants to attack a new country, there are always dissidents or exiles from those countries. We constantly heard from Iraqi exiles during the run-up to the war in Iraq who would appear and say, I hate my government, and they often hated their government for very good reason. That does not change the fact, and I have no doubt that people who live in Iran are repressed. I mean, that is not even a debatable point. Just like
my question is
I'm
not
gonna
about the rationale.
I'm going to get to your point.
Because your argument is based on the
point.
fact that there are rationals. They're not.
Miss, you asked your question. Yeah. Okay.
If there are all kinds of repressive regimes in the world that will produce exiles. You can hear from Saudi exiles, you can hear from Egyptian exiles, you can hear from Emirati exiles, you can hear from exiles from South America and from Asia and all over the world, people who leave their country and say that their government is repressive, and it's absolutely true. The problem is that war, going around bombing every country, trying to change every other government that we think is bad, or that people stand up and say, I'm from that country and it's bad, like we heard from Iraqi exiles, does not lead to better outcomes. You can sell the war that way. You can say, oh, we're going to go to war. We heard this, all the same stuff from Saddam Hussein. He repressed his people. He exported terrorism in the Middle East. We need to change his government. Once we change his government, there's going to be democracy flourishing.
Not to mention the weapons of mass destruction. Don't leave that one out. That was a big thing. That was a big thing right after 9/11. Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and preparing to use them. That's, let's not.
All throughout the Middle East, we ended up killing close to 1 million Iraqis, if not more, and lost tens of thousands of people either to casualties or to death from our own country, none of which was told to the American people before they sold that war as well. So yes, you can hear and it's not just Iraq. By the way, it was the war in Libya, which we were told we're just going into, but put a no-fly zone over Benghazi. We changed that regime. We turned away and left, and that country ended up with anarchy and slavery and all kinds of migrant crises. We destroyed Syria with the CIA war, where we fought on the same side as Al-Qaeda and ISIS because there were Syrian exiles saying Assad is the greatest dictator. We were told, no, Assad is the new Hitler. This is propaganda that is given to you over and over and over. And I think our responsibility as Americans is to finally say, we are not supporting more wars in the name of this propagandistic framework.
I'm sorry. We've gone over time with the Q&A. We're going to go to the summation portion of the evening. Each side gets 5 minutes.
Oh, this should be good. The summation portion. Yeah, no, this should be good. This should be good.
Summarize, and according to the rules, the affirmative goes first. Take it away, Alan. 5 minutes of summary.
I believe that Iran is a rational actor. I have said in my writings that Iran is the smartest, cleverest, most rational enemy that Israel and the United States have had for a long, long time. But it is a deeply evil, the regime, a deeply evil rational actor. And we must deal with a deeply, deeply evil. You don't have to compare things to Hitler to believe that it's a deeply evil regime. I think that Russia is a deeply evil regime. It's not Hitler. There's no comparable regime to Hitler. No regime today are building gas chambers or taking children and putting them in crematoriums. No, there's nothing like Hitler, and nobody should ever make comparisons to Hitler. The point I make is that Iran, if it could, would do what Hitler wanted to do. It would try to end.
That's making the comparison to Hitler. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Like you said, oh, we shouldn't compare it to Hitler, but they would if they could. They'd be Hitler if they could. Like, come on, dude. What are you talking about? There's the sort of the level of contradiction that this guy comes out with. Oh, they're completely irrational, insane, but they're the most rational enemy we've ever had. They're no one can compare them to Hitler, but if they could, they'd be like Hitler. Like, come on, you're contradictory. It's terrible.
And the presence of the Jewish people in the Middle East. And Glenn has acknowledged now, and I was glad to hear him say that he doesn't believe that the nation state of the Jewish people, Israel, doesn't have a right to exist. It does have a right to exist.
Sure.
But an Iran with a nuclear arsenal will make it impossible for Israel to continue to exist, because Rafsanjani was right. Israel is a one-bomb state. All Iran has to do is send 3,000 drones with nuclear warheads, and one of them hit Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, and it will kill millions of Israelis and Israeli Arabs as well.
Can't Israel strike Iran in the same way? Can't they fire nuclear weapons at Iran and kill millions of Iranians? I don't understand this whole thing of, well, Iran could just attack Israel, but Israel can attack Iran. What? Like, I totally get that they're a horrible regime. It's just you're acting like the only people that matter in this are the Israeli people, and they do matter, and they do have a right to be there. I agree, but why are you acting like Israel can't, like we should attack the poor Iranians and have Iranian people dying? Doesn't matter. I don't understand this rhetoric.
The cataclysmic impact of a nuclear-armed Iran is so great that it really argues for some degree of risk-taking. Now, we live in a world where it's so much easier not to take risks. As I mentioned, using the German experience of the 1930s, nobody was really blamed for allowing Hitler to emerge and kill 50 or so, how many million people there were. But if there had been an attack on Germany and 10,000 civilians, German civilians, had been killed, the people who did it would have been regarded as warmongers, and history would never have been able to judge them, even though now, in retrospect, we know that would have been the right thing. Yes, Iran is a rational regime, and that's why we have to deal with it in a rational way. And the rational way is to destroy its most potent potential weapon. And that.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. That's a fair point, Robin. But most Muslims don't say that either. I wouldn't say that most Iranians are saying that. It is their leaders, though. I do acknowledge that point. I do acknowledge that point, but I do think some sort of people in Israel do have a sort of, from the river to the sea kind of mentality of taking over the rest of sort of Palestine. I'm just putting out there that why are we worried? Like, we should be worried about Iran, but sort of just that doesn't negate Iran should be worried about Israel.
That is its nuclear arsenal. And yes, people have cried wolf for a long time and said that we're close to the nuclear arsenal, but we could make the mistake of missing that. And if we make the mistake of missing that, then you get a North Korea which exports nuclear armaments to terrorist groups. And so, on balance, it's absolutely essential that we think hard and make the right decision here. And again, I want to end as I started by acknowledging this is a very difficult issue, and one should not move toward any kind of preventive war without taking into account all the risks. And Glenn is right in outlining all these risks. There are real potential risks in taking preventive action against Iran. My point tonight, right from the beginning, has been to emphasize that there are real potential risks in not taking actions. If we could accept Glenn's point, and he said it at the beginning, that we should sit down and have a rational discussion with Iran and hope that we can persuade Iran to do the right thing. We can't do that. Whether it was right or wrong to have the Iran nuclear deal, whether it was right or wrong to get out of the nuclear deal, that's yesterday's news.
Well, yeah, no, he's been for Trump all this time, so he's actually part of his legal team. So of course he's not going to denigrate Trump and what he did. Dude.
What's essential now is to live in today's world and to compare the risks of taking no action with the risks of taking what is a potentially dangerous action. And
yeah, but that's assuming that the risks that you're telling us, just like Iraq, are actually real and not another lie sold to us that may or may not be true.
I'm here to argue that although it's a closed case, the costs of being wrong by not taking action exceed the costs of being wrong in this case by taking surgical military action. Thank you.
Somebody from Glenn, usually you take the podium. You want to sit? Okay.
So the reason I began the debate at that podium by reading a bunch of studies and historical examples is because I know how easy it is to sell wars to a population that has been hearing for decades that there's some country we are about to attack, or we want to attack, who's so evil and is our enemy. And we constantly watch the government and the media being able to sell these wars to people by getting them all pent up with fear mongering and then fake promises about how easy the war is going to be. And that's why I started by reading how since 2005, everything you've heard tonight has been issuing from the Israeli government and America's Israel supporters that, oh, Iran is months getting away from getting a nuclear weapon. If we don't strike them in the next 2 months, it means they're absolutely going to proliferate. And none of that has ever happened. He says the agreement with Iran, a potential agreement with Iran, is in the past. It is in the past. That's why we should learn from it. He who forgets history is doomed to repeat its mistakes. Everything that I read you about the weapons inspectors, about the agencies, about Western Europe, all said the same thing, that when we integrated Iran back into the international community, they opened up their nuclear facilities, let inspectors in, and there was no progress being made toward nuclear weapons because countries only seek nuclear weapons when they feel threatened. That was the example I focused on so much because I knew Professor Dershowitz would rely on it so much, hold it up as the model that he wants to show you. Oh, look, Israel struck the Iraqi facility in 1981. Let's do it again. The problem was, as everything I've read you demonstrated, is that it was the striking of Iraq's nuclear facility in 1981 that led to this massive attempt, this increased attempt on the part of Saudi Arabia and Iraq and other countries around the world to try and get nuclear weapons. The more we tell the world, we are the United States, we bomb.
Well, he's even interrupting his closing. This is supposed to be a proper debate in the Soho. Wow, this is incredible. Dershowitz is a terrible person.
Whoever we want, we go around the world and we just bomb whoever we feel like bombing. That is when other countries are going to be incentivized. Now, it is amazing to me to sit in 2024 and hear someone make all these starry promises about how easy regime change will be, about how great it will be. You have so many examples of regime change words that have been sold to you in the last 20 years. Everything he's saying about what will happen in Iran. Oh, everything will flourish in the Middle East. There will be peace in the Middle East. Everything is going to break out.
And he did say that. He said it would be a great, glowing example to the rest of the nations around it. I don't believe that for a second. I don't. I really don't, especially when he's talking to the Shah's son to reinstall that horrible dictatorship. And don't get me wrong, Dershowitz says, oh, well, they're not like the nice Ayatollah. Nobody's saying the Ayatollahs are nice. Like, nobody is saying that. They're absolutely dreadful. But just replacing them with a friendly dictator is not going to freaking work. It's not.
That was all said with Iraq. And the only real outcome of regime change in Iraq, aside from all of the deaths that it caused, was that there was a power vacuum in the Middle East that led to ISIS, and it drove Iraq further into the arms of the Iranians. And we spent 15 years and trillions of dollars in endless wars when we were told, like he's trying to convince you now, oh, it's a very easy operation. We're just going to be a month there. We're just going to bomb them, and then we're going to win, and we're going to walk away. Now,
that was how the Iraq war was sold. It's just, we'll just go in there. It'll be very quick, very simple, very easy. There was not like... And sort of what lulled people into a false sense of security was that at the start it was easy. Like the arms that the Americans had and that they deployed just absolutely destroyed the Iraqi military. Like they absolutely annihilated it. But that isn't like just annihilating its military isn't the end to a war. It just isn't. It was what came after and the horrendous death involved. Like, it was just like, oh, we'll just take out Saddam. That's going to be what it's like. We'll just take out Saddam. What they didn't bank on, and what they absolutely forgot about, was that even though Saddam was a dictator and he was a horrible person, you're coming into somebody else's country. I might not like my government, right? Just say Trump's in charge. You hate your government. You hate Trump. You think he's just a joke, or you hate, Biden, and you think he's horrible or whatever. But another country invades your country, and you're going to fight them. This isn't hard to understand. Like, Saddam Hussein may have been a horrible dictator, may have been a horrible person, but it's not they're one of your people. Like, this is the thing. Like, you don't just, people will fight you if you come into their country to overthrow their government, even if they don't like the government.
I do think that the point of the United States and the role that we're playing in the world is one we haven't spent much time focusing on, but one that we should end with. Because what he's saying is, anytime that we look at any place in the world, we don't like the government's not doing what we say. Again, we don't have any problems with dictators or with tyrannical governments. In fact, the core of American foreign policy since the end of World War II, throughout the Cold War and then into the War on Terror, is we want dictatorial regimes. It's much easier to install them because they're there to keep the population, many of whom would be anti-American because of their perception of all the wars that we start, under control. Those dictators are there in all these wonderful countries that we're told we should replicate, like Saudi Arabia and Egypt and all those Gulf states. They're there to keep the population down, and we're happy with it. We support those countries. We don't go around the world attacking other countries or trying to remove their government because we want to give those people freedom and democracy. We only do it when we see a government that doesn't do our bidding. And that was fine to do at the end of World War II when we had supremacy. Maybe it was fine when the Cold War fell and we had supremacy in the 1990s. This is now a multipolar world. If you look at why so many countries are going to China or joining BRICS, are leaving the Western influence, it's because of the resentment that this kind of mentality is spawning. What do you think the world is going to do as they watch the United States continuously assert its unilateral and singular right to start wars against other countries who are not attacking us? Because we have been told over and over since birth that our country is the shining beacon on the hill, that we are the emblem of democracy, that it's only other countries, those bad countries like Iran and Russia and China, where bad things happen. We're the good countries. Our wars are good. I think if there's anything that the last 20 years of history should tell us, is that we have to start thinking critically about all of this propaganda, thinking critically about what the role of our own country is in the world, and all of the devastation and misery and suffering and bloodshed and instability that happens whenever our government or our media convinces us to support yet another war. This would be the worst of all of those wars because of how big Iran is, because of how sophisticated their military is. And if you thought Iraq was bad, think about what bombing Iran will entail and make your decision based on that.
All right. I have in my hand the Soliforum Tootsie Roll that will be tossed at the winner of this Oxford-style debate. Those of you on the right side here, would you please open your machines? Brett, please open the.
Does anyone want to hear the vote? I don't really care about what the vote is. This is more of the same, and I'm aghast that we're proposing another war in the Middle East. I am aghast that we haven't learnt our lessons. I'm horrified that that we're proposing again to have a war to overthrow a regime in the Middle East. Like, we apparently have learnt nothing from Iraq. And if America does go to war, as much as Australia is an ally of the US, I don't think we'll join it. I don't think we'll join it. Like, I think that last time was the last time we will go into an aggressive war. I don't know if you remember Iraq, but there was a coalition of the willing. It was made up of Britain. It was made up of Australia. It was made up of all these people. We were just essentially lied to by the conservatives in the US over the situation, and we helped, and we're responsible for that. I don't think we're going to be in another invasion of another country, even if it is like there would have to be some overwhelming evidence that Iran has a nuclear device and is preparing to use it. I think that it's a difficult situation. I get that it's a difficult situation. I get that I get that Israel is very vulnerable, sort of where it is, but I don't think that the people in Israel feel more vulnerable than the people in Iran. And that's part of the problem, that if you go around starting a lot of wars in their area, they're not going to want you there. And so I don't see why we can't offer the same deal to Iran and start working with them. I don't see why we can't do that. I don't like, okay, maybe they won't accept it, but I don't see why we can't try. The problem is that because Trump cancelled it, they probably won't trust the United States to fulfill their obligations. They broke their deal. They broke their word. Which is horrible, absolutely horrible. And since that deal was broken by Trump, we have been the unsafest, and Israel has been the unsafest it ever has. Because of that one idiot and his failure to understand Middle Eastern policy. Yeah, no, it was so basically it happened when she was 12 and 13. So due to the what happened in the Supreme Court, and I actually sent Robin Webster a news story about this. A 13-year-old has now had a child in the US as a direct consequence to Roe v. Wade being overturned. I can't remember the name of the decision. Yes, that has happened in the US. Because they were in, I think it was Mississippi. I want to say Mississippi, and the closest place they could get an abortion was Chicago. Which, I mean, I'm not from the US, but I understand that's out of some people's range to go. Yeah. Yeah, it's Dobbs. Thank you, Robin. Thank you. It was Dobbs. Thank you very much. I just think that this conservative rhetoric, we can't keep falling for this stuff. This whole idea. Look, and I want to point out the inconsistencies Dershowitz has, apart from his, quite frankly, awful behavior the entire way through the debate, interrupting his opponent, interrupting the moderator, like just being an absolute goon. I wanted somebody to, was nobody in charge of the mics there? Could we not kill it when he had to shut up? Because seriously, the man just interrupted everybody. Greenwald, he had a couple of interruptions. I won't let him go for that. He definitely interrupted a couple of times. But for the most part, he waited upon his opponent to stop speaking and then spoke. Like, Dershowitz, what are you doing? This is awful behavior. And secondarily, the contradictions that he had. You know, the massive contradictions that he had. The whole thing about, well, they're an irrational, crazed nation that could just break out spontaneously at any time, as opposed to later on when he's saying, no, they're the most intelligent and rational country we've ever seen, or enemy we've ever seen. You know, there's you know, this contradictory statement about we can't compare any Russia to Germany, but Iran is the next Germany because it can do this horrible. It's just, you know, it's just awful. His entire performance was awful. You know, obviously, I agree with the substance of Greenwald's claims. I think that we have heard a lot of this rhetoric over the past few years. Like it appalls me that we're thinking of going into another Middle Eastern country, thinking that we're going to suddenly change the regime and make it a better place. I have massive doubts about that. I think that what will happen is that they will start launching attacks on Iran, and Iranians who don't even particularly like their government will have family killed and homes destroyed and buildings destroyed and stand up and fight the US. That's what I think, because that's what happened in Iraq. And like Greenwald says, the US doesn't have a problem with dictators. If they did, they would be all over. You know, let's face it. Who put Saddam Hussein there in the first place? The US. So yeah, this is actually upsetting, and it's upsetting to think that people like Dershowitz are still talking about this. Really odious performance by him. Greenwald, I think he had some decorum and some dignity. Is he right? I'm not even 100% sure. I'm not even 100% sure. But he does have a good point that we keep getting sold this rhetoric, and he had other instances like Syria and Libya that were this, well, let's go in there, it'll be a quick surgical strike, we're going to take out this thing and take out this dictator, and it never seems to work like that. It's always a long, prolonged slog. Even when the dictator is taken out, like Saddam Hussein was taken out, it left a power vacuum. And then, you know, ISIS was the result. Taking out Saddam Hussein didn't actually make things better. I don't know why we would think that taking out the regime of the Ayatollahs when we don't even know what the people of Iran want. Not really. I mean, Dershowitz himself said, well, I don't know what the people are. No, we don't. That's the whole point. But I can bet you that if you start going in and destroying their country, they will fight you. That's what I can promise you. Because that's what people do. Because they might not like their government, but when your, bomb accidentally hits a school, they're going to be fighting you. And then in the aftermath, you'll have a bigger enemy than when you started with, just like Iraq. Yeah, I'm, and that's not to say that Iran is a nice nation. It's a horrible nation. I think that I think that the uprising, latest uprising, has been women over there. When a woman was killed for not wearing a hijab, I think I would support that and sort of try to allow them to rise up against their government. But let's not pretend that military strikes against the government aren't going to kill innocent civilians and aren't going to piss off the very people that you want to fight against their government. It's going to. Absolutely going to. Yeah, I think this was an interesting debate. I think it was sort of both sides presented. I really disagree with the conservative side. Dershowitz's side is, I think that he is glossing over a whole load of stuff. And I think he's part of a if you're bringing up an incident from 1979 to justify why Israel bombed somebody's embassy, I'm really sorry, but you've lost the plot. They say it was a fake embassy. Nobody else seems to think so. And that's not to say that, Israel doesn't deserve to exist. Absolutely, it deserves to exist. And it shouldn't be attacked like it was by Hamas. But that doesn't justify any action taken in retaliation and any action taken against any other country. You can't say, hey, because this country attacked you, you get to unilaterally bomb all of its civilians. No, that's not how things are done. And it's horrible. We need to somehow work together to bring about the world that we want, not use violence to implement it. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. but chat looks on like it's on to another topic, and I don't mind. I've got a lot to say about that as well, to be honest with you. Yeah. You know, Iran in the 1970s was just a wonderful country. It was just a very democratic, very just a normal, country. Until they were overthrown by and the CIA and the US did that. And we've got to acknowledge what we've done. Australia was complicit in the attack on Iraq, which was an illegal war, and I think that the people involved who lied to their countries should be arrested for war crimes. They should be. So I know that George Bush was head. He should be arrested for war crimes. John Howard, who was the Australian Prime Minister, should be arrested for war crimes. And I take responsibility for my country doing something that was horrendous, awful, absolutely awful. Over 1 million Iraqis died in that war. How many Iranians will we sacrifice for Israel feeling safe? How many? Million? 2 million? What's the population of Iran? How many do you want to sacrifice? These are people we're talking about. Okay, just for Iraq before the invasion was probably about when was the Iraq war? Uh 2003. Yeah, 2003 to 2011. I forgot how long it lasted. Yeah, it was like about 25 million was the population of Iraq, right? Iran is 88 million people. 88 million people live in Iran. Iran. So that's sort of, over 3 times as many people live in Iran as did in Iraq. We're talking about millions of deaths here. That's what we're talking about. Millions of people dying. And I want to point out with the very first thing that I pointed out in part 1, the argument that Iran will take some kind of nuclear action, it is a slippery slope argument. It's if they develop this and they produce this and they give it to other people and those other people, like, it really is a slippery slope argument. Because if the world discovers that Iran's handed off a nuclear device to some terrorist group, Iran knows that that's the catalyst for they will not be there much longer. Like that they know that. And despite what Dershowitz says, they are, well, as he said at the start, they are a rational people. They are a rational nation. They're not the crazed, insane, lunatic like he portrayed in the first half, and in the second half he was kind of like, no, they're rational. But yeah, so say no to war. Demand good, solid evidence before we go and do anything that endangers so many lives. we should not, or to have, we absolutely should not to have another Iraq where in the wake of 9/11, people were just outright lied to. They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There was no weapons of mass destruction. They said that Saddam Hussein was working with Al-Qaeda, which is the dumbest statement that has ever been made. Like, that is the dumbest thing. He was not working with Al-Qaeda or, any kind of militant fundamentalist Muslim group, because he was a dictator and they threatened his power. The stupidest thing ever said. Yes, he was horrible to his people. But anyway, I want to thank you for joining me. That's the debate. I would really love to hear your own comments. Certainly throw some comments down if you disagree. From the last one, I even had a Russian bot come by and copy paste stuff in there. So, which was very interesting because it was sort of arguing for Putin and how Ukraine's bad. And I'm not even sure. I think I mentioned it like once. So, really, really weird stuff, started to respond and it pasted a same comment twice. It was definitely a bot, which was really interesting. So if you're a bot, you don't have to comment. Please don't, but we'll try and respond. But, if you want to say something, sure, I definitely will listen. I don't like Dershowitz. I don't like his attitude of, well, Israel's in danger. Let's surgically strike Iran. I don't like that. I think that anybody saying that they can surgically strike something without harming others, how often has it worked out that way? That we've surgically struck something and only that thing and no civilians have gotten hurt. And that's really who I don't care if the Ayatollahs are taken out. I don't care. The Ayatollahs are horrible. It's the people there. They're the ones to always suffer, always. And the last 20 years has not shown us any different. It's always the civilians coming out worst. So, yeah, how many civilians do you want to sacrifice? I don't know. I don't know if it's justified. Like, I get what Dershowitz is doing. He's making people afraid. But, if Iran does gets a nuclear weapon, it could wipe out Israel, sure. Yeah. But Israel already has nuclear weapons. It's a difficult situation. I get that. But I think Greenwald is right. I think that a peaceful solution is still on the table. I think that it's a much better way. And if only some orange clown had not reneged on the deal with Iran, we would be a lot safer right now. And Israel would be a lot safer right now. But the warmongers don't like that. They don't like that. And that, hello, Rabbit Atheist, and I love the Fallout reference. Absolutely. But yeah, that was an interesting debate. I'm sorry it is a bit of a depressing topic. I'll try and find some more theological ones or, some happier ones next time. It's just that just happened like a couple of weeks ago. My part one was a couple of weeks ago. And I think it is important to note that there are the people out there sort of strongly advocating to bomb Iran. And not just that, but strongly advocating for regime change, which frightens me. But don't forget to be kind to yourself. Be kind to each other. Try diplomacy first. Absolutely. Don't go scorched earth straight off the gate. Just try diplomacy. But I want to thank you all so much for joining me. A big thank you to Barnaby who sent in that super sticker. It really helps me out. Again, if you have any comments or anything you want to comment on, please do leave them down below. I'll always read them. Even if I don't respond, I definitely read them. But thank you all so much, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.